Hello students, good morning. Welcome back to my channel Molecular Mysteries. So in the last class we have discussed about the female reproductive system, the external parts, internal parts. So this class let's talk about the menstrual cycle. So what is menstrual cycle? We have to go in detail and what are the hormones, what are the surges, like which amount of hormone is more during the first half of your menstrual cycle and which hormone really dominates your second half of your menstrual cycle. So for that let's get into the class. Okay. Yes. So this class I will talk about the first half of your cycle. Okay. So generally that a female takes 28 days on average for a menstrual cycle to happen. Like day from the day one of her first cycle, it generally starts with the one day and ends with around 28 days. Some ladies would have around 25, 26, 27. So the average is around 28 days. I'm just for your convenience, I'm saying it is 28 days of your average cycle. So, in this class, let's talk about what happens before ovulation. What are the changes that happen in female reproductive system during and before ovulation? So, what is the ovulation? Ovulation is the process where the ova is released from your Graafian follicle, or where the time where the ovary is ready to produce the egg and egg is ready to get fertilized, right? So that is what I'm just dividing into 0 to 14, 14 to 28 for your understanding. The first half of your cycle is called the ovulation, right? Before ovulation, I can say. So now let's divide this. So actually, there are two important events happening during a menstrual cycle. One happening during, or one that is happening in the uterus area, and the one that is happening in the ovary area. So I can divide both into ovarian events and the uterine events. Okay. So these two are happening simultaneously when a menstrual cycle starts. Like not when ovulation starts, these two will simultaneously start happening, right? So now let's see what are the events that are happening in the uterus and what are the events that are happening in the ovary. For your understanding, let's say I'm dividing. See, here in the ovary, there are two important phases called follicular phase. So follicles, what are follicles anyway, I will describe in the next slide. So follicles, they are growing, right? The graphene follicles are growing. So that is why it is called the follicular phase. So it is developing of a follicle, right? That is what happens when the start of your ovulation, when it is like before ovulation, body is preparing on the follicular phase. And the second part, which I can say, is the luteal phase. Okay, don't get confused. When the follicular phase is happening in the ovary, simultaneously proliferative phase happens in the uterus. So, what does proliferative phase means? Proliferation. So, whatever the follicle, what happens in follicular phase? There is a release of a hormone called estrogen by the Graafian follicles, right? This particular estrogen that is being released in the ovary will go into the uterus and starts going for your proliferative phase. What does proliferation mean? It is preparing the body for your fertilization. It is preparing for your endometrium is being thoroughly made for holding the baby if at all the egg that is being released is fertilized. So if you don't get confused, proliferative phase is a phase where it is going for a further proliferation of your egg with the sperm. So that is what you call the follicular phase. Follicular phase leading to make into proliferative phase. So that is why the estrogen that is being released in the follicular phase will be helpful in the proliferative phase of your uterus. In the same way, what happens in luteal phase? Luteum. So name itself is its corpus luteum, right? This particular corpus luteum will be releasing a hormone called progesterone, right? This particular progesterone, in the lack of your particular fertilization, it leads to the secretory phase of your uterus. So this part I will discuss in the second half. So this topic, see, let's divide. This is happening in the first half of your cycle, 0 to 14. The follicular phase in the ovary happens with the simultaneous action of proliferative phase in the uterus. This is the first half of your cycle, which happens simultaneously. In the second half of cycle, starting from 14 and ending with 28, this generally happens like from luteal phase happening in ovary simultaneously with the secretory phase in the uterus. So luteal phase in ovary and secretory phase in uterus. So these two are simultaneously happening in the second half, and these two are simultaneously happening in the first half. Please remember, and it is very important. Okay, so please don't get confused. I just want to give you what are the hormones that are released. So let's see. I told you this is how it looks like, the ovary, and this is a fallopian tube, and you have your endometrium, sorry, a germinal epithelium lined ovary, which releases egg every month. Okay, see, let's go for what's really happening here. I want to show you. Yeah, this is the important diagram I want to show you. See, before that, we should be knowing what is oocytes. So, oocyte is a primary site. I can say it's a primary oocyte with which is being surrounded by two types of cells called granulosa cells and theca cells. See, this is your primary oocyte. The one which is looking in green color is what you call the primary oocyte. This particular primary oocyte is generally arrested in meiosis 1 diplotin stage. If you are having any doubt, please refer to the meiosis cell division in my channel. Okay, I will also link that, because this particular primary oocyte will get arrested and will only get activated when it enters into the puberty. Please remember, till puberty it will be arrested in meiosis 1 diplotin stage. Okay, so this particular primary oocyte is surrounded by a group of cells called granulosa cells. So okay, these orange color one are granulosa cells, and this particular blue cells are called the theca cells. So all the cells, the primary oocyte that is been surrounded by two groups of cells are called primordial follicle. Okay, this is the primordial follicle. You have many primordial follicles, but only one has to get activated and matured. Okay, only one has to get activated and matured. So what happens here? I know, I told you about the pituitary gland, right? Pituitary gland is a master gland which will take control of all the important hormones that are regulated in your body, right? So, you know, already know the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. If you want that, I'll also link in the description. In the anterior pituitary of the body would produce this hormone called follicle stimulating hormone, right? What happens? Then is an axis called pituitary ovarian axis, hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis. This get activated once the girl enters into a puberty, right? When she's about to get mature, the pituitary and ovarian axis get activated. That leads to the anterior pituitary part releasing your follicle stimulating hormone. So I told you, the name itself says follicle stimulating hormone is the one which stimulates your Graafian follicle or which stimulates your primordial follicle, right? This particular follicle stimulating hormone would act upon the granulosa cells. So please remember, the FSH would mainly activate your granulosa cells of your of your primordial follicle. Then only there is a release of hormone called estrogen. So they will definitely ask you which hormone would release, like which hormone will activate on granulosa cells, which hormone will activate on your theca cells. So please remember, the follicle stimulating hormone would act on the follicle granulosa cells of the follicle, releasing your estrogen. This estrogen is a very important hormone which really regulates the uh, process before ovulation. So that is why the estrogen is in a higher amount surge. I can say estrogen is in a surge. Okay, so till now we have discussed about follicle stimulating hormone having high production of high amount of estrogen. What does estrogen do? I told you, the estrogen that is produced in the ovary, right? That is produced in the ovary will go for the activation of your proliferative phase in the uterus, right? In the uterine events, the particular estrogen that is released here will immediately activate your uterine events, mainly the proliferative. What is proliferative? It will prepare the endometrium to happen, so that proliferation happens there. So it is a simultaneous action of both here and there, both ovary and uterus, right? Now let's see. Now, so what are the main important functions of your estrogen? So the estrogen is released, right? So once estrogen is released in your body, so you can easily see that in the blood of a lady, at that time. So estrogen will be in a higher amount during the first half of your cycle. That is no doubt. And that estrogen, what are the main functions of the estrogen produced? That particular estrogen should go for a negative feedback to FSH. What does the negative feedback mean? See, estrogen, once it is released into the blood, for the events to happen, if more and more estrogen is present, more and more Graafian follicles will be more and more, the number will be more, and but we need only the dominant primordial follicle, right? Only one egg has to be matured, not all. So for that, for all the eggs not to mature at a time, this particular estrogen should be reduced. For that reduction of this particular FSH should be reduced, right? Further follicles should never get matured. Only one follicle should get matured, the dominant primordial follicle should be matured. And if FSH is more and more produced, more and more Graafian follicles get matured, which is not good, right? Only one thing, only dominant should be there. So for that to happen, this particular estrogen that is being released from FSH will go for a negative feedback saying enough, don't produce more and more FSH. So there will be negative feedback, so FSH will be dropped. And then the particular estrogen I told you, it immediately goes to the endometrium area for the uterine events to happen. Second, the third important, very important thing is positive feedback for LH. See, what is LH? LH is a luteinizing hormone, right? So this hormone is a very important hormone in the process of menstrual cycle in whole reproductive system, because LH is the one which forms the corpus luteum. It is because of LH the corpus luteum is formed. Okay, that is why what it does, the estrogen that is being released from the Graafian follicles or primordial follicles, it will give a positive feedback saying, come on LH, you have to get increased, come, like so LH keeps on increasing. So estrogen will be in a higher amount, and also the luteinizing hormone will also be in a higher level in the first half year cycle. So the first 14 days before the egg is about to release, the first 14 days, these are the major changes that are happening. Negative feedback, already estrogen is present in the blood. Negative feedback to follicle stimulating hormone saying stop, no more FSH. Second thing, it will prepare the uterus for your endometrium shedding, or it can also prepare for your baby development. And the third one, you have your positive feedback maintaining the LH, which is important for your corpus luteum formation, right? So these are the major changes that has to happen when estrogen is being released into your blood. Now let's see what how the LH acts upon. So LH that I told you is luteinizing hormone that is been released, right? This particular luteinizing hormone, because of the higher production of estrogen, this LH will also be having a positive feedback. This LH will be increased in the cells in the blood, and this particular LH mainly acts upon the both. So please remember, the if FSH is acting upon the granulosa cells of the primary oocyte, it is releasing estrogen. But the LH, if it is acting upon the granulosa cells, it is giving progesterone. Okay, please remember, it's an important MCQ question. In the same time, the luteinizing hormone, if it is acting upon the theca cells of your primordial follicle, it gives you androgens. Okay, and this androgens in the presence of an enzyme called aromatase will again produce the estrogen. So again, what is LH doing? At the same time, it is producing the estrogen acting upon the theca cells. At the same time, LH cells is also producing the granulosa cells. Acting upon the granulosa cells, it is producing the progesterone. So what I can say you is, the first half of your menstrual cycle, I'm talking about 0 to 14 days, there will be a high amount of luteinizing hormone, there will be a high amount of estrogen, and also a lower or little amount of progesterone, because luteinizing hormone is acting upon the granulosa cells for producing your progesterone, right? These are the main important functions of your luteinizing hormone. At the same time, this luteinizing hormone will also give a positive feedback for your follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. You know that, right? This particular progesterone, it gives a positive feedback for follicle stimulating and LH. Why it does that? See, luteinizing hormone is very important for your corpus luteum formation. So corpus luteum formation is the thing that happens, right, during the ovulation. The luteum has to come out, and particularly it has to get ruptured, then only the egg comes out, and the ovulation is ready, and egg is ready for your fertilization, or it can go back for your menstrual cycle. Either of the phases would be happening. So for that, the LH should be more. By the end of 14th day or 13th day, LH should be in the top position. Then only the Graafian follicles gets matured and get released. See, let's see. Okay, so if I'm not confusing you, please note that these are the ups and downs of your hormones that happen during the ovulation and menstrual cycle. Okay, see, yeah, what is the main important function of your LH apart from all these things? This luteinizing hormone, when it is I told you, when it is acting upon your granulosa cells, when it is acting upon your theca cells, it says that the primary oocyte within it is converted into the secondary oocyte. Once it forms a secondary oocyte, it is ready for your ovulation to happen, right? So that is how the maturation of your Graafian follicles happen. The primordial follicle converted into a Graafian follicle, and finally it is released during the ovulation on 14th day of your cycle. See, generally, as I'm talking about the cycle being 28 days, the ovulation generally happens at the mid, called mid cycle, so it is called the 14th day, right? Generally the ovulation happens, and it depends, like if people have a cycle around 25 to 26, generally around 11th day or 12th day or 13th day, that particular ovulation does happen, right? So it's all about the mid area, a mid cycle, right? So at that time, the primary follicles get converted into the secondary follicle, sorry, primary oocyte gets converted into secondary oocyte, and thus it is ready for your ovulation to happen. It is all about the LH. So luteinizing hormone plays a major role for the formation of or the ovulation to happen. So in the next class, I'll also discuss about what happens in the second phase. So I told you the second phase is all about the secretory phase of your ovary, sorry, uterus, and luteal phase of your ovary, right? So how corpus luteum is being degraded, and what are the hormones that are playing role, I will tell you in the next class. Okay, so hope I am clear with the concept of the menstrual cycle. What happens in the next class itself, I will also give you a graph, because you have to know what really, which hormone dominates, which hormone reduces. For that understanding, I'm giving you the graph also, so please get to know more about it. So thank you and have a nice day. If you have any questions, comments, please let me know in the comment box, and thank you, have a nice day. Bye bye.